great ones. As your presentation and speaker coach, I believe, me personally, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. provides one of the greatest examples any speaker or orator can study. And let me be clear, I am not suggesting that as a speaker, we imitate his cadence, his vocal inflection, or his speaking style, because authenticity matters. Your voice must remain your own. But what every communicator can study is the structure of his message, the clarity of his conviction, and the way he delivers ideas with power and precision. Dr. King was a legendary orator, and while many people would point that his iconic speech, "I Have a Dream," as his most famous address, and rightfully so, because it is brilliant. But my personal favorite among his many masterpieces is "I've Been to the Mountaintop." There is something poetic and deeply human about this speech. On April the 3rd, 1968, he arrived in Memphis to support striking sanitation workers. He was exhausted, under the weather, and initially he stayed behind at the hotel just to rest. But as the crowd began to gather, eager to hear from him, Ralph Abernathy called and encouraged him to come to speak. Dr. King, he arrived without extensive preparation. There was not a polished manuscript or a carefully rehearsed performance or speech. Yet somehow, this remarkable orator, in that moment, he delivered what many consider as one of the greatest speeches ever given. A speech filled with conviction and vulnerability, courage and foresight. And perhaps that is what makes it extraordinary. Dr. King, as he had done numerous times, did not merely give a speech, he created a moment. I will take advantage of this moment to recite this powerful and indelible speech. I've been to the mountaintop. Thank you very kindly, my friends. As I listened to Ralph Abernathy and his eloquent and generous introduction, and when I thought about it myself, I wondered who he was talking about. It is always good to have your close friends and associates to say something good about you. And Ralph Abernathy is the best friend that I have in the world. I'm delighted to see each of you here tonight in spite of a storm warning. You reveal that you are determined to go on anyhow. Something is happening in Memphis. Something is happening in our world, and you know, if I were standing at the beginning of time with the possibility of taking a kind of general and panoramic view of the whole of human history up until now, and the Almighty said to me, "Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in?" I would take a mental flight by Egypt, and I would watch God's children in their magnificent trek from the dark dungeons of Egypt, through, or rather across, the Red Sea, through the wilderness and on towards the Promised Land. And in spite of its magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. I would move on by Greece and take my mental mind to Mount Olympus, and I would see Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Euripides, and Aristophanes assembled around the Parthenon. And I would watch them around the Parthenon as they discussed the the great and internal issues of reality. But no, I wouldn't stop there. I would go on, even to the great heyday of the Roman Empire, and I would see developments around there through various emperors and leaders. But no, I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the days of the Renaissance and get a quick picture of all that the Renaissance did for the cultural and aesthetic life of man. But I wouldn't stop there. I would even go on by the way that the man for whom I am named, and I would watch Martin Luther as he tacked theses on the door at the Church of Wittenberg. I wouldn't stop there. I would come up even to 1863 and watch a vacillating president by the name of Abraham Lincoln finally come to the conclusion that he had to sign the Emancipation Proclamation. But I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the early 1930s and see a man grappling with the problems of the bankruptcy of his nation and come with an eloquent cry that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. But I wouldn't stop there. Strangely enough, I would turn to the Almighty and I would say, if you allow me to live just a few years in the second half of the 20th century, I will be happy.